Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to this panel session on how the vendor ecosystem can demonstrate the value of private 5G, which means we're here to talk business cases and use cases and what it takes to make this thing work and what it takes to get results out of private networks and everything that's going on top of them. As per the introductory address just now, I think the private cellular market feels somehow a little conflicted and contradictory. Like half the time you hear about how business is booming and half the time you hear about how it's not going fast enough. We will attempt to get to the bottom of some of that and how this kind of hype and despair, if you like, might be resolved by the ecosystem in a clearer kind of path of growth. My name is James Blackman. I'm an editor at RCR Wireless and I'm chairing this session. And I'm joined by an excellent panel, which mixes network provision with service provision and boots on the ground sales and integration and consultancy and advice about how to make these systems work for enterprises. So to introduce briefly, I'm joined by Steve Ashton, who is MD for NextG Works and also 5G and Connectivity Manager for Worcestershire County Council. Jalal Berahu, who is Market Development Director at IBWave. Peter Cappiello, Chief Executive Officer at Future Technologies, and David O'Byrne, Senior Business Development Manager at Druid Software. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Right, we have 40 minutes, a little bit less on the clock. We have time for questions. Please ask as we go in the event platform, and we'll get to them as we can. This is an open forum, as it were, so get involved. Don't be shy. Ask questions. And I will ask them of the panel. In the meantime, I have a few of my own. And so maybe just to start, we can kind of rerun those introductions a little bit, and I can get each of the panelists to say a few words about themselves, their companies, and their experience with private 5G. If we stick with the same order I introduce you, Steve, how are you doing?
Good afternoon. So, yeah, I'm with my NextG Works hat. I'm firmly in the position there of a bit of a mixture of things, really. From a NextG Works operates as a test bed, the trial place where people can come and trial solutions at our venue or at other places we've deployed 5G networks. We also offer a range of kind of professional services around the deployment of 5G use case development, use case build, systems integration, those kind of things. And then I'm here also with my Worcestershire County Council hat on, where we can be a customer. So somebody who takes on board advanced wireless or 5G services from that space. So I can talk from both sides on that one.
Lovely, thank you. And Jalal, what is IBWave and what do you do? Give us a sense of that.
Thank you, James. So my name is Jalal Berahu. I'm a Market Development Director at IBWave. IBWave has been in the telecom business for more than 20 years now, mainly developing software for survey, design, planning of in-building network of campus-type environments. We are the leading software company in that space. We've been working with the carrier ecosystem for a very long time. And then in the past few years, we have seen a lot of activity in the enterprise space. And I'm very happy to be here with you talking about private networks.
Lovely. Thanks, Jalal. And Pete?
Thanks, James. Pete Cappiello, CEO of Future Technologies, based in New York City. We're a network solution provider, been in the industry for about 25 years, but specific to private cellular, been participating for about 14 years and excited to chat today.
Lovely. And finally, David, how are you doing?
Doing well, James. Thank you. I'm David O'Byrne, the Business Development Manager for Druid Software. We're based in Dublin in Ireland, but we have offices all over the world. Druid has been in the private core network vendor space probably longer than anybody. We've been in the space for nearly 20 years, starting off with 2G cores and following all the way through to 5G and 5G advanced core now. We're one of the leaders in the cores dedicated to the enterprise and private network space, the neutral host space, and private core roaming solutions.
Lovely. Okay, thank you all. So a reminder, we are open for questions. Ask them as we go. Just if we could set the scene and just to get the ball rolling, the state of the market. Pete, maybe you've been doing this for 14 years. How do you perceive it? How is it going? Give us something, there's a hype story here. There's a post-hype story here. Is the market slow as it is being characterized? Should it be faster? Give us a sense of your take on the state of things at the moment?
Yeah, no, I think, we're pretty bullish on the market. We're focused on the industrial segments, so manufacturing, ports, energy, to name a few. And then we also have a government practice where we work with the U.S. Army and the Air Force on some fairly large scale activities. So, to give a couple, benchmarks, we've got in the federal space, we have about 2,500 square miles of coverage deployed, which is a pretty large footprint. We're proud of that. Shows kind of, some scale. On the industrial side, last year we won a project that has 5 million square feet of indoor coverage with an advanced use case of AMRs. So kind of two waypoints, but I'd say the best lead indicator of the growth is our related private wireless pipeline grew from about 40 million last year around this time to we're up over 185 million, and seems to be scaling every week. And I think the big driver of that is moving from proof of concepts that took periods of time and maybe there wasn't defined value of the proof of concept to individual production sites. And where we're at now from a scaling perspective is instead of doing one production site, we may win an award for 10 or 20, and it provides a lot more elasticity in terms of the market potential and the scaling. That's based upon everybody working together to improve the offering and the value. Maybe some of the other folks can contribute, but we're definitely on the we like the reality of it, and we feel like we're in the right place at the right time to take advantage of the market conditions.
Stig, tell us what you're finding. I mean, that sounds like a business clearly that's going well. It sounds like a market that's going well. What are you finding in Worcestershire and the UK at large? What's your, and are enterprises seeing value from this, or is it still a challenge?
I think early doors. We were quite confident in where this network was going to go. I think I've been saying to my board at Next Year Works tomorrow for the last couple of years now. It started off for us positively. There was quite a bit of interest, particularly from the larger enterprises. I think now there's quite a lot of work being done in the UK from central government actually in terms of trying to drive adoption. And I think I'm seeing more of that adoption now. I think you're ready for that wave to come. I think particularly in the small and medium-sized enterprises and local and kind of local government around usage. We'll probably discuss barriers a little bit later, but for the time being, it does feel like it's on a crest, and I think some of that is driven by the availability of some of what I would term the tier 2 vendors. So that sort of space, a lot of work being done in Open RAN, a lot of work being done on DUs and CUs, and what can happen there. So that's what we've been trialing with and been playing with. I can certainly see an appetite. I still think that the building of the use cases or stacking multiple use cases into a place case is really important at the minute to fully justify that return on investment for parties. And I think there's probably one or two other things where you might start to see the tier 1 manufacturers start to specify things within the procurement chains where they require that data to help them cover what we call scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emission requirements here in the UK with kind of the carbon program and net zero, etc. So I think they're all opportunities, as is health and safety, as is productivity, and I think it's that the building blocks I think are coming together. And I think, as Pete said, I think I do believe that we're actually on the cusp of that wave at the minute here, where we are.
David, are we on the cusp of a wave? I mean, you hear contrary reports, don't you? So what's the Druid take for a company that's been up since the very beginning?
I think there's an industry in hyping and then debunking the lack of delivery on the hype, which is a great place to be in. Things are definitely peaking, and the amount of business we're doing is definitely growing. Is it matching up to what was forecast by industry analysts 5 years ago when they said there'd be a 300% CAGR and $9 bazillion annual sales in it? Of course not. Nothing ever is. This is the reality of it, and reality is always less shiny than the magic spreadsheet forecasts. The key things is looking at influencers or looking at indicators. A huge amount of the forecasted massive growth is around functionality for industry, specifically for manufacturing and deterministic networks, location management, Ethernet PDU sessions, time-sensitive networking, deterministic networks that can run a Profinet. And this is what you need to unlock the opportunity in manufacturing. These are all ecosystem dependent. These are all dependent on radio that supports it, on core that supports it, on end user devices and chipsets that support it. And we're not building Lego here. There is a time lag once the standard is completed to bring all of this into the chipset design, into end user devices, into the radios, and then into the end world. And the really cool stuff in 3GPP was only specified in, I would argue, release 16. Some would say some of the real industry deliverers aren't coming until release 17. So those verticals are back behind where they were forecast to be. That said, as Peter said, we're starting to see the people who were coming in doing POCs and kind of hello world apps in manufacturing 2-3 years ago are now coming in and saying, okay, what does this look like over 27 sites over 3 continents? So that is that indicator that we're coming out of our difficult teenage years and starting to grow up into a real serious industry. The other thing I'll say is that in verticals where deterministic networks were not as critical, and the key problem was they just need to move massive amounts of data from A to B wirelessly in a hurry. And I'm thinking about when an airplane lands and you have, a terabit of telemetrics data that you need to get off of that plane and into the servers of the engine manufacturers and the airframe manufacturers to analyze it, to decide what sort of support and service it needs before it gets turned around. Those sorts of use cases, which nobody forecast at the beginning, are absolutely flying, to use a bad pun. There is a massive amount of interest in things like mining, warehousing, logistics, and airports on apron side, also on passenger side, but on apron side, there's a massive amount of interest and a lot of business going on in private networks as well. So it depends on the vertical. It depends on the ecosystem that you need to deliver the thing. I think Steve's point about layering use cases is absolutely key. But yeah, it's definitely growing rapidly.
Jalal, what's your take on this? I mean, we've heard there that it's it's going, business is good, actually, ostensibly, it's building, we're on the cusp of something, and almost what did we expect? That the feature set's not finished, that the devices aren't commonly available, and this is a natural kind of evolution, that the upgrade cycle in industrial is a long one, I guess, that it's a sector which is cautious. What are you seeing in the market? It sounds to me as if we shouldn't be surprised. This is the natural evolution path, and we should take some confidence that the value is being communicated.
Right. So James, I think, to start off, inside IBWave, so I track enterprise deployments, I track the market trends. I need to come up with kind of like a go-to-market strategy for the whole enterprise space, right? What I've seen is similar to what David mentioned is, I review a lot of the reports that come out in the market, and there's been a lot of hype for the past few years, but it keeps being revised all the time, usually to the downside, right? That's something that I've noticed. But if we look deeply within the private network space, then we start looking at different verticals and even different regions, right? When we look at the regions, then for sure, like I see the US, the UK, Germany, France, Japan are leading kind of like the private network market space. But within those, then you also have verticals that are really taking off, and you have others that are lagging. So we look at manufacturing, for example, oil and gas, energy, transportation, mining. All of these, they have very valid use cases. A lot of them rely on safety, on security, reliability of the network. They don't have a problem anymore of justifying the investment because they really need it. It has to be there. But if you look at the smaller, maybe small to medium businesses in any of the verticals, they probably have a harder time trying to justify the ROI and value they're getting out of the private network, and that's why there's probably hesitancy from them in that space. Also, another thing that I've seen, and it might be confusing to the private network customers, is there are too many solutions out there, right? I mean, every time you hear about a new company coming up with a product solution for the private network space, for the smaller players, smaller customers, I think they just have a wide variety of products and services that are being offered. And I've been kind of like waiting for consolidation in that market. I haven't seen it yet. I mean, you still see leaders in that market space, doing a lot of trials, proof of concept, or even deployment. But again, I haven't seen a lot of consolidation in that space where it becomes a lot easier to, pick a solution and really prove the value of the investment you are making in that space. I don't know if the rest of the panelists are waiting for the consolidation or not, but at least, from my perspective, that's what I see, where I see the market going. And once we get to that point, I think it's going to become a mainstream, proven concept, and it's going to be out there as private network, really justifying the value.
Okay, Jalal, and I think I'll pick up on that point about products in the market, because I kind of have a counter impression that I mean, maybe not the companies, but the variety of systems out there is kind of is hitting a number of different kind of sectors in the market at the moment. But we'll come back to that. Just on the ROI thing, because I think this is about value. We've got to talk about ROI. Pete, perhaps we can go back to you, because you've got the pipeline. You're the boots on the ground. You're putting this in. How is that ROI story? Is it an easy one to calculate? Is it an easy one to resolve? It sounds to me, if you're selling them 10 at a time type thing, it's a bit of a given. Just talk around that.
Yeah, no, I think, I think it's the challenge and the opportunity. For us, we spend 30-40% of our time re-educating the client on the market conditions, the product offerings and whatnot. But, where we're finding scale is really two buckets. It's either a coverage network or it's an advanced use case network. I think as things mature, we'll see a combination of those two things. But, if we look at a chemical plant as an example, you have limitations on where you could put Wi-Fi infrastructure. And let's just say you have a rectangle, and today you could cover 60% of your rectangle. So it's 60% of your people, it's 60% of your industrial automation equipment. If we're able to use private cellular and cover 100% of the operational footprint coverage, it connects 100% of the people, it connects 100% of the industrial automation. And and for the cost of that, it really, it's a very simple check mark. If we go into an EV factory and we're going to connect an advanced use case like AMRs that are doing material handling as well as handling the vehicle through manufacturing, that anchor use case provides enough ROI, and then anything else you put on the private 5G network is an add-on. We kind of see it as I'll give a third example. In the military space, you have these large range networks where there's not density of population. So nobody's really incentivized to build coverage. And obviously the nature of it is a control sensitive environment. So we build large range networks to connect surges of warfighters as they're getting trained, 10,000 people at a clip. A lot of value in having that type of network infrastructure for those specific use cases, but it has to be done the right way. That's really where we're finding the cross section to get customers to do things. Whereas that 30-40% of re-education, we're trying to segregate or segment the hype, augmented reality, virtual reality, digital twin, all this fancy stuff from, let's say, common sense use cases that you can make a decision on today.
Yeah. Okay. And David, I think, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just a follow-up question, maybe repeat, Pete, and this is something, maybe that we read a lot about, but when we're calculating the value on ROI, so like you mentioned, I mean, we're talking about, the cost, we're talking about all of this, about the network equipment that you're using and the coverage, but for you dealing with customers, I think, one of the value of really having this network is probably not about, the tangible assets, but it's more about the intangible things that come after that, which is, increased production, efficiency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Safety. Yeah, no, it's definitely the quotient of of everything, but like safety, productivity, visibility, location of assets, things like that are the tangible value points. And again, I didn't mention earlier, but we look at things as a heterogeneous, network infrastructure. We've been doing network transformation for 25 years. So we're adding a new network to do something. So it's coverage, it's advanced use case, but then you blend in your existing networks and, kind of you can home in your devices and use cases to the right network. So this is just adding another network option to enhance the value of the productivity.
Yeah, okay. And David, maybe to bring you in here, I know when we spoke previously, you talked around this a little bit around a kind of the idea of it as an infrastructure investment rather than just a single killer use case, which is going to bang all this once and that's the end of it. And just, I guess that's more of a question really around how an enterprise views what it's buying and the kind of expansive kind of nature of this project.
It's similar, I guess. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just explain that kind of thought process.
I'm sure it's similar to what Peter is going through in terms of customer re-education and getting them to think about this maybe a little bit differently. The analogy that we use that seems to click with people is putting in a network just for AMRs is like saying we're going to build a new highway, but we're only going to put cement mixers on it. And the price of the highway will have to be covered by all the cement mixers that go across it in year one. The price of cement would skyrocket and nobody would ever justify building the road. You have to put in the infrastructure using the same thought process that people used to put in, water treatment facilities or roads or highways. What you have is not fit for purpose. If you have Wi-Fi driven AGVs that are breaking down whenever they fail to do a cell handover, your infrastructure is not fit for purpose. You need to invest in new reliable infrastructure. Then when you have it in, then you can start to think about, okay, how do we amortize the cost of this across the world? Like, what are all of the benefits that this is bringing to us? And at that point, you can talk about everything from moving your paperwork, your documentation, all to digital, not having people go back to computers or terminals to input data because they can do it on the smart device in their hand. Not having those breakdowns when Wi-Fi driven devices cross from one cell to another. And I know Wi-Fi 7 can manage a cell-to-cell handover, but not every chip in every Wi-Fi device understands that it should manage cell-to-cell handover. So you get these sticky cells, and every minute in these environments is money. So it's really about changing the context away from what's the killer app for this. If I put augmented reality glasses on 5 of my staff, will that pay for the private network? No, it won't pay for the private network. But you need the private network because something you're doing today is not working. And that's why you need to invest in new infrastructure. So that's kind of the driver that we use for it.
And Steve, what do you make of that with the discussions you're having with, particularly with I guess small and medium-sized enterprises, which I guess lots of times are just kind of struggling to keep the lights on. Presumably they need to, they need to see that return instantly, and so that anchor case is the thing which initially swings it, perhaps, and then you stack and you explain, here's the future ahead of you. You're on mute, Steve.
I think James, he's saying he has an audio challenge at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll perhaps come back to that unless you want to chime in. Dave, maybe you can respond. That presumably that is the point, that calculation, which makes perfect sense to me, but that is a kind of a gnarly and slightly abstract piece of mathematics, if you like, and often, yeah, go ahead.
Well, it is and it isn't. So in the US, our customers there are typically, very large manufacturers, big industrial household names. But when you transfer this over to the German market, which is the biggest market in Europe, the number of middle-sized companies that are involved in all ends of the manufacturing food chain goes up exponentially. So you are talking to companies with maximum 1,000 employees, very often somewhere in the 200 to 300 employees that need a solution that works for them. But I think that the ecosystem is responding to that. I think the technology, so our initial product in the 5G space was a standalone core. Now we're coming up with different in versions of that. So cloud core, cloud plus edge core, and the industry is responding to the needs of these customers that are saying, I need a solution that is costing me less than 10K a month on site, supporting 1,000 users. The industry is responding to this, because ultimately that's about the commercials of it, not about the technology of it. If you have enough scale, you can bring something just about anywhere. And the cloud plus edge paradigm is affecting and revolutionizing all sorts of technology. So why shouldn't it also affect private networks? So
Yeah,
certainly,
okay.
yeah, we're definitely seeing demand, and we're finding that there are ways to bring a solution to almost any size of enterprise.
And Jalal, I guess, I mean, just to your view of the market, and I guess this is the logic to bring in 5G, because if you're covering an enterprise space with coverage, I guess in the first instance, rather than often the advanced use cases, lots of times I imagine this stuff is sold initially on a coverage model. You could make the case for LTE, right? But you've got to build for the future, and therefore there is a process, there is a value to explain with the enterprise to articulate what 5G means and what you could be able to do with it in the future.
That's correct, James. And this reminds me a little bit of the the transition from 3G to 4G. Back when I started with IBWave in 2009, 2010 timeframe, there was a lot of discussion about LTE, and then a lot of the RF engineers back then that I used to deal with, they still had the mindset of coverage in terms of signal strength, right? And then we had to kind of like train them and explain and kind of like justify 4G, that is more about data, providing data. I see kind of like the same shift now from LTE to 5G. 5G provides a much faster network, more reliable. When we're talking about specific applications where there's tremendous data that is being that has to move around, then 4G is probably not going to be the right technology to use there. You need 5G for mission critical, for mass communication. All of that requires 5G. What I see now is like we're moving into kind of like the same direction, where we have to kind of like train and educate a lot of the users, again, on the uses of 5G, especially for private network. But not only from an engineering perspective, but a lot of the customers that I deal with, that I work with, they're having a hard time educating even the end customer, which are the enterprises, usually from the IT department, because they come from this IT background. They deal a lot with Wi-Fi, and they don't have a lot of expertise on 5G. So they complain a lot about the lack of expertise in that space, education and training. At IBWave, we're starting to focus a lot on education and training in the enterprise private network space. And I think we need to get over that, where in the past, for me as an RF engineer, we understood the language very, very well from the carrier. We would be talking the same language when it comes to KPIs, technical terms. But now when we're dealing with enterprises, I see the engineering teams, they have to become more of a consultant, right? Not only working on engineering tasks, but become more of consultants, working with the customer, working hand in hand, explaining to them what is the value of 5G, but they also have to compare, they have to do what if scenarios. What if I do 5G, what is it going to give me? If I do Wi-Fi, what is it going to give me? Compare them and really see which drives the value a little bit more. So, I mean, I say to the RF engineers, start thinking more into consultant mindset and not just from the technical perspective in the private network space.
Yeah, okay. We seem to have lost Steve momentarily. I apologize for this.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get him back. I'm just gonna so we're open for questions. Ask them. We got a couple coming in. I will get to them momentarily. I just want to quickly file through some kind of potential barriers related to the kind of specialisms on the kind of panel a little bit. Pete, the integration picture, is that how difficult is that? I mean, certainly this whole sector seems to have come around a little bit onto the role of SIs. There is, I would suggest, the MNOs to an extent have stepped back and accepted, they have a role, they know they have a role, but the SI will oftentimes lead. Just that integration picture, it seems complex. Talk around that, where things go wrong, mixing and matching systems, some of that kind of stuff. Where do these projects succeed and fail, if you like?
Yeah, no problem. So from a blueprint perspective, just to hit on what David and Jalal commented on, for us, when we look at the RAN, in a lot of cases, 4G today, and we just talk about lanes on the highway, we're going to create a 10-lane highway, 10 megahertz channel, 20 megahertz channel. Let's do that today. Let's have the ability to go to 5G. Maybe we can enhance it to have 50 lanes on the highway, 50 megahertz channels. That resonates to the customer in terms of the RAN side. On the core side, I think it's a little bit more difficult to build the blueprint because there's such a disparity in how we talk about core. There's air gap systems, there's dedicated network systems, there's shared systems like MOCN, now neutral host, and they're used interchangeably. The definitions of those become a little bit blurred. But what we try to do is come up with that blueprint, and then we partner with the IT customer, the OT customer, to translate their current working conditions. So like our chief operating officer was CTO Georgia Pacific, is that domain knowledge. So how do we take an IT mindset, map that to a telco CIQ, so that way we could kind of marry up those two universes using a CIQ. But we've had to kind of blend a telco CIQ to be something that the IT and OT people can embrace and understand, and that's the education side. And to Jalal's point, we're not just trying to get data fill, we're trying to educate the client so we can get the CIQ done. We've invested a fair amount in our factory acceptance test environment, where we'll then take the network infrastructure, put it in that environment, and we have a bit of edge and AI that we're using to simulate the customer's environments at our headquarters in Atlanta. So when we get on site, we're actually integrating into the customer stack. We're simulating as much of that as possible. So it's blueprint, CIQ, education, FAT. And then when we finally show up on site, we're maybe dealing with the 10% of true integration on site to enhance the customer experience, versus we see counterpoints where people will drop kit directly on site, be developing the CIQ after the kit's on site, because let's say maybe they're motivated to ship hardware that exists, James. So we see some examples where equipment showing up on site, then creating the blueprint and the CIQ. And, I'd say making the sausage in front of the client is not the best experience. So we've tried to optimize that blueprint, CIQ, FAT, and then, we're integrating the 10% in front of the customer to try to make the customer experience better and also make it more efficient, because their primary business is not network. Their primary business is manufacturing or energy or, whatever. So that's what we're trying to do to help enhance that experience of integration.
Yeah.
And David,
if I could just add to that, James.
Go ahead.
At Druid, we liked systems integrators before it was cool. We've always seen the SI role as being absolutely key in front of the customer, because they're the best vendor in the world doesn't understand customer requirements and really rock the customer ecosystem. And you need to understand that. You need to have the flexibility and the responsiveness and the reliability to be able to meet their SLAs, because telco SLAs, for the most part, just do not fly in the manufacturing world. The outage times, the times to repair, the famous anecdote about what an operator's NOC sees one radio cell go down and everybody shrugs and goes, people, they'll get coverage from the other cell. But they don't realize that cell is the only cell in the manufacturing floor. The manufacturing floor is out, and productivity is gone for the day, and production is gone for the day. And this one cell is costing them millions. So it's just a different mindset. With the greatest of respect to our operator friends and customers, you need to be business focused in order to really understand this. You need to understand the division lines between IT and OT, and the fact that to a lot of OT guys, the other company is merely the competitor, whereas IT is the enemy. And they don't want to see Wi-Fi systems. They don't want to see the IT guys bringing in systems into their domain. Likewise, the IT guys might not be comfortable going into that domain. So there is a lot of legacy that is built into the customer base, and you need to understand that, and you need to be able to navigate that. The one point that Pete didn't touch on the core side, and something that we're very passionate about, is simplicity. That even though this is cellular technology, you are overwhelmingly not likely to have a cellular engineer on the site to manage it. And it is incumbent on all of the vendors to, first of all, be responsive to the customer. If they want to keep all of their data on site, they don't want anything in the cloud, they don't want anything going off site, they want to be able to control everything themselves. You have to meet them where they are, and you have to provide that functionality. If there's a guy in front of you who's telling you he's the new cellular engineer, and you know last week he was the Wi-Fi engineer, you have to meet him where he is or her where she is, and understand that they need a GUI, they need a training program, they need everything that talks to them in their language and allows them to translate what they know into the admin of cellular networks. So this is where Druid's legacy of having been working with non-experts for 20 years really comes home, because the guys and girls who have to run this network on a day-to-day basis see that we're putting it in their language. So yeah, it's about understanding what's going on the customer side and not trying to impose a template that sounded great back in the office, but when you come to site, you realize it's not like that.
But Jalal, I mean, equally, it's about the enterprise and cellular is simple. But I mean, I'd suggest perhaps that your whole reason for being is that it's not that simple, and you have to plan, or at least it's not like stringing up a bunch of Wi-Fi access points, and that's your piece of business. That a good network can be made into can be kind of ruined by bad network design. Just explain that and where that value is achieved, if you like.
Yeah, so one thing we always, when we talk about educating, training people, RF engineers who are using software, is you're trying to avoid as many errors after the deployment as possible. So you would like to bring in as much optimization of your network during the design and planning phase. Because if you make a simple mistake and then you go and deploy and you find out you have a gap in your coverage, or you're not meeting the KPIs in terms of uplink capacity, all of that, then it's going to take a long time to do the optimization. It's going to cost you a lot of money. So try to bring in that during the design and planning phase. That's my best advice to the RF engineers out there.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a question here about airports. I think David, you raised the use case. Maybe Pete, I could get you to answer it, just because you've typed a few ideas into the comment box. But it's I mean, they're talking around the FAA stuff in the US. Interference issues. Will the what's going on on the ground resolve what's going on potentially in the air? I guess. But more generally, your view of the airports and what these kind of I guess ports too, but airports, what they represent in terms of a business opportunity for a private 5G network.
I mean, we're seeing, so I'll answer the spectrum part as a subset, but you have big logistics companies that use airplanes and airports, right? So they're looking at operational technology for how they scan more effectively. So you have that. You have airline companies who do lots of maintenance. So they have hangars where they're doing maintenance. So can they have an operational technology network inside of a hangar? We're doing a project like that right now. And then you have the airport itself, which, as we've learned more about these airport communities, a lot of times the airport has responsibility to provide shared services into the airport to the different vendors that are there. And connectivity is a key part of that. So there's fiber, there's Wi-Fi, there's public cellular. We're seeing a fourth leg of the stool appear, where that private cellular network to provide those shared services for operational technology use cases is there. On the spectrum side, it's a good point. We don't think it's a one size fits all. Depends where the airport is. If it's close to the water, the seaboard, there's certain regulations. So CBRS, there's a filtering point there. But then with the FAA, I mean, they're definitely looking at this to say, before we have mass adoption, what's best practice. So there are options for spectrum from third-party spectrum entities, and then also partnering with the carriers. So, we look at, again, looking at the airport, there's a few different opportunities there where there's, good value that can be created. But depending upon the specifics, we have to look at the spectrum and, think through that to make sure it supports the test of time and regulations.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a nice use case to finish on. I am going to have to call it to a halt. Time is up. It's never enough. It's never enough. And we could go on. And that we soldiered on mostly with just 3 panelists. But anyway, look, I'm going to hand over to Bruno Thomas from the Wireless Broadband Alliance, who is in conversation with Arvind Singh from Verizon Business, and they're discussing the intersection of private and neutral host networks, which David touched on a little bit. So it's a good segue into that anyway. Should be good. In the meantime, I would like to thank our panel, Jalal Berahu from IBWave, Peter Capiello from Future Technologies, David O'Byrne from Druid Software, and the rarely seen Steve Ashton from NextG Works. Guys, thank you all very much. It was a great discussion, and thanks everybody for tuning in, and I'll catch you later today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Great to be part of it.